I didn't discover my wife's betrayal through a dramatic confession or a late-night phone call. I found it slowly, through distance, excuses, and a silence that kept getting louder. And the worst part? I didn't even know how deep it went until it was already too late. Hi, everyone. I never thought I'd be writing something like this. My name is Daniel, 31, and my wife, Elena, 27, have been together for almost 6 years. We have a 5-year-old daughter, and for a long time, I truly believed we were building a stable life. English isn't our first language, so I'll try my best to explain everything clearly. For most of our relationship, I thought we were solid. Not perfect, but real. We argued sometimes, we struggled financially at points, but we always came back to each other. At least, that's what I thought. Then, a few months ago, something changed. Elena became distant in a way I couldn't explain. Not angry, not cold, just unavailable. Physical closeness almost disappeared. Where intimacy used to be natural, it became rare, maybe once or twice a month. Every time I tried to talk about it, she'd brush it off. I'm tired. I'm stressed. Nothing's wrong. I wanted to believe her.
I kept telling myself this was normal. We had a child, we'd just bought a house, life was busy. I convinced myself that patience was the answer, that pressure would only make things worse. But the silence didn't feel like stress. It felt intentional. One night, after weeks of avoiding the subject, I finally pushed harder. I asked her directly if she was still happy, if she still wanted this marriage. That's when she said something that shattered me. She told me she didn't see the point in continuing our relationship, that we felt more like friends than partners. Hearing those words felt like the floor dropping out from under me. What made it worse was that this wasn't the first time. About 2 years earlier, she'd said something similar. Back then, I took it as a wake-up call. I worked on myself. I put more effort into our relationship, and it seemed to work. Since then, we had bought a house just 6 months ago, renovated it from scratch, bought furniture, and even went on holidays together to 2 different countries. I truly believed we were rebuilding something stronger. So hearing this again broke something in me. For days, we barely spoke. The house felt heavy. Our daughter noticed the tension, even if she didn't understand it. I felt like I was watching my life fall apart in slow motion. Eventually, I told Elena I wanted to try one last time, for us, for our child. She agreed. We sat down and talked about what each of us needed. We promised to work on things. I left that conversation exhausted but hopeful. I didn't know yet that the truth was already moving around me, visible to others, hidden only from me. And I had no idea that what I thought was the lowest point was only the beginning. I thought agreeing to try again meant we were rebuilding. What I didn't realize was that she'd already checked out, and trying was just buying time. After that talk, Elena acted lighter. Not loving, not connected, just lighter, like someone who'd handed off a burden and expected the other person to carry it. She smiled more around the house, spoke gently, even laughed with our daughter in a way that almost convinced me I'd imagined the tension. Almost. There was a strange disconnect between her words and her presence. She said she wanted to work on us, but nothing about her behavior suggested effort. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't initiate conversations. It felt like she'd said the right things so she wouldn't look like the one giving up. I tried anyway. I cooked more, took our daughter out so Elena could rest, asked about her course, her plans, her stress. I wanted to show her I was still invested, still here. She accepted the effort without returning it. A few days later, a friend messaged me. Nothing dramatic, just a sentence that lodged itself in my chest. "Hey, this might be nothing, but I saw Elena get dropped off near your street yesterday. A van. Didn't see who was driving."
My heart started racing before my mind caught up. I stared at the message for a long time, telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe a classmate, maybe a coworker, maybe I was reading into something harmless. I didn't accuse her that night. I waited. The next evening, I asked casually, "How did you get home yesterday?" She didn't hesitate. "I took the bus," she said. Too fast. "Oh," I replied. "I thought maybe someone dropped you off." Her face changed, just slightly. A flicker of irritation crossed it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said sharply. "Why?" "A friend thought they saw—" "Well, they're wrong," she interrupted. "I don't like being questioned like this." There it was again. Not reassurance, not curiosity, anger. I dropped it. Not because I believed her, but because something felt off in a way I couldn't articulate yet. I told myself to wait, to see if the story stayed consistent. It didn't. The following week, Elena had her course again, every Tuesday evening. She texted me around 6 p.m. saying she had an exam and would be home around 10. At 9:30, she messaged again. "Going for a quick drink with a friend after. Be back soon." I didn't reply. I didn't want to sound controlling. I didn't want another argument about trust. She came home close to midnight. She seemed energized. And then something unexpected happened. She initiated intimacy for the first time in months. I remember lying there afterward, staring at the ceiling, torn between relief and confusion. Part of me wanted to believe this was a sign we were reconnecting, that the distance was finally lifting. I ignored the voice in my head asking why now. 2 days later, while checking our joint bank account, I noticed a charge I didn't recognize. £33, online medical service. It didn't make sense. We hadn't discussed any appointments. I didn't say anything right away. I just took a screenshot and tried to rationalize it. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I asked ChatGPT what that kind of charge was usually for. The answer made my stomach drop. It suggested it was commonly linked to a morning-after pill. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself there had to be another explanation. I told myself I was becoming paranoid. The next morning, taking out the trash, I felt something hard inside the bag. I opened it, and there it was, the packaging. I stood there frozen, holding proof I wasn't ready to accept. At that moment, my entire world tilted. But I still didn't know the full truth. Not even close. I was holding proof in my hands, and she still looked me in the eyes and told me it wasn't real. I didn't confront Elena immediately after finding the packaging. I stood there in the kitchen for a long time, staring at it like maybe it would change into something harmless if I waited long enough. My hands were shaking, my chest tight. Every instinct told me to wake her up, to demand answers, to scream. I didn't. I put the package back where I found it and sat down instead. I needed to hear her explanation. Not an argument, not a guess, her explanation. When she came into the kitchen later that morning, I asked her calmly if we could talk. She looked annoyed before I even said anything, like she already knew the conversation wouldn't go her way. I placed the packaging on the table between us. Her eyes flicked to it for half a second, just long enough. "That's not mine," she said immediately. No pause, no confusion, no questions. "Then whose is it?" I asked quietly. She sighed, like I was inconveniencing her. "It belongs to my friend," she said, "the one who drives me to the course sometimes." I waited. She didn't add anything. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that your friend used our house to throw this away?" She crossed her arms. "Yes." I could feel something inside me cracking, not loudly, not dramatically, just splitting. "Okay," I said. "Then call her." Her head snapped up. "What?" "Call her," I repeated. "Put her on speaker and ask her if it's hers." Her face hardened instantly. "I promised her I wouldn't tell anyone," she said. "I'm not breaking her trust."
That was the moment everything changed. Because suddenly this wasn't about embarrassment or privacy, it was about choosing someone else's secret over our marriage. I looked at her and said something I never thought I'd say. "If you don't call her," I said, "then we're done." She stared at me like I was bluffing. "I can't believe you're doing this," she said. "You're destroying our family over something you don't even understand." I didn't raise my voice. "I understand enough," I replied. She refused. So I said the words out loud. "We're divorcing." For the first time, she went quiet. Not apologetic, not remorseful, shocked. The next day, we sat together and started the divorce process online, like two strangers filling out paperwork. It felt surreal. We had just bought this house, put everything we had into it. Neither of us could afford it alone. Every form felt like a nail. At one point, Elena opened her laptop to help fill something out. I noticed she was logged in to her ChatGPT account. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice, but something caught my eye. Searches, questions, phrases, all related to the same thing. I didn't say anything then. That night she went to bed. I slept on the couch. The house felt hollow, like it was already grieving. Around 2 a.m., I walked past her laptop again. Still open, still logged in. I told myself I shouldn't look. I told myself it would only hurt more. But the truth is, I already knew she'd lied. I just didn't know how much. So I sat down, and I started reading. What I found didn't just explain the pill. It rewrote our entire marriage.
I thought I was about to confirm one betrayal. Instead, I uncovered an entire life I was never meant to see. I opened her laptop with the same hands I'd used to carry our daughter to bed, to sign the mortgage papers, to hold Elena when she cried about stress and exhaustion. I didn't know yet that those hands were about to shake for 3 straight hours. Her ChatGPT history was still open. At first, it didn't make sense. Short prompts, innocent questions, things like, "Rewrite this message but sound more playful," or "How do I reply without sounding desperate?" I scrolled slowly, trying to understand the context. Then the names appeared. Different men, different conversations, different tones. My chest tightened. I clicked one thread. She was asking ChatGPT to rewrite messages to a man I didn't recognize. Flirty, suggestive, intimate. Not jokes, not harmless banter. Messages about missing him, about wanting to see him again, about what she liked when he touched her. I felt dizzy. I told myself this had to be old, something before we met, something I didn't understand yet. Then I checked the dates. Recent, very recent. I scrolled further. Another conversation, another man, same pattern, same kind of language, same emotional closeness. She asked ChatGPT how to respond after FaceTiming while my husband is at work. My stomach dropped. I kept reading. She talked openly about having sex with different men, about meeting them during the day, about seeing one person and then another not long after. She asked whether she should take a morning after pill after unprotected sex. She mentioned that she'd had sex 2 days earlier and was planning to meet someone again soon. All of this while coming home to me, to our daughter, to the life we built. I sat there, frozen, scrolling through conversation after conversation, my mind struggling to keep up with what my eyes were seeing. There weren't 1 or 2 mistakes. There was a system, a routine, a second life running parallel to ours. She used ChatGPT to translate messages into better English, to sound more seductive, to hide suspicion,
to plan replies while I was at work earning money for the house she was betraying. At some point, I stopped feeling shock. I felt numb. I took photos of everything, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed proof for myself. I needed to know this was real, that I wasn't hallucinating. 3 hours passed without me noticing. When I finally closed the laptop, dawn was starting to creep in through the windows. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the floor, realizing that the woman who'd spent years telling me I wasn't enough had been spreading herself across strangers while I tried to save our marriage. The morning after pill wasn't about a single mistake. It was maintenance. When Elena woke up, she found me sitting at the table. She looked tired, nervous. "We need to talk," she said. I looked up at her and replied quietly, "I know everything." Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just slid my phone across the table and let her see the photos. And in that moment, the cheerful woman who told me nothing was wrong finally disappeared. What replaced her wasn't remorse, it was fear. When the lies stopped working, she didn't apologize. She tried to rewrite reality. For a long time, Elena didn't say anything. She stared at the phone like it was a foreign object, like maybe if she looked long enough, the images would rearrange themselves into something harmless. Her mouth opened once, then closed again. "This isn't what it looks like," she finally said. I didn't respond. She looked up at me, eyes glossy, not with guilt, but panic. "You went through my things," she added quickly. "That's a huge violation of privacy." There it was. Not "I'm sorry," not "I hurt you," an accusation. "I found evidence of months of cheating," I said calmly, "and you're angry that I saw it." She stood up abruptly, chair scraping loudly. "You had no right," she said. "You don't understand the context of those conversations." "Then explain it," I replied. She started pacing. "It was just talking at first," she said. "I was lonely. You were distant. I didn't feel wanted." I almost laughed. For months, I'd been begging her to talk, to connect, to tell me what she needed. Now I was being told I hadn't been present enough. "I never meant for it to go that far," she continued. "Things just happened." "How many times?" I asked. She froze. "I don't know," she said quietly. That answer told me more than a number ever could. "You wrote about having sex with different men," I said calmly, "sometimes more than one in the same day." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You weren't supposed to see that." That sentence crushed what little hope I had left. Not "I'm sorry," not "I hate myself for this," just "you weren't supposed to know." She started crying then, real tears this time. She talked about confusion, about feeling empty, about needing validation, about how ChatGPT made it easier to communicate, like technology was the problem. She never once asked how I felt. She never once mentioned our daughter. When I asked why she lied about the morning after pill, she said, "I didn't want to lose you." But the truth was clear. She didn't want to lose stability. She didn't want to lose the house, the safety, the version of life where she could cheat freely and still come home to a man who paid the bills and took care of their child. I told her we were done. She begged me not to tell anyone. "I'll get help," she said. "I'll stop, I swear." I believed she'd stop. I didn't believe she'd change. That's the difference. I stood up, feeling strangely calm. "This isn't about punishment," I said. "It's about reality, and this reality doesn't include us anymore." She collapsed into the chair, sobbing. I walked out of the room. Behind me was the sound of a woman realizing that lies don't disappear just because they're exposed. Ahead of me was something terrifying, but honest, and I chose that. The worst part wasn't learning what she'd done. It was realizing how much of my life had been built on a lie, and how fast everything could collapse once the truth surfaced. The hours after that conversation passed in a blur. Elena stayed in the bedroom, crying on and off, sending messages to people I didn't want to know about. I stayed in the living room with our daughter, helping her with homework, making dinner, pretending the world hadn't just split in half. That contrast nearly broke me. I kept looking at my child and thinking, how long has this been happening while I read bedtime stories and planned our future? The betrayal wasn't just between adults anymore. It had seeped into the space where a child was supposed to feel safe. The next morning, we talked again, but it wasn't emotional. It was practical. We discussed separation, living arrangements, the house, finances, custody. Everything sounded cold when spoken out loud, but I knew I had to stay grounded. If I fell apart, there'd be no one left to hold things together. Elena oscillated between panic and defensiveness. One minute she'd say, "I ruined everything, I know." The next she'd snap, "You weren't perfect either." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to prove anything anymore. The truth was already loud enough. She asked me not to tell anyone, her parents, our friends, anyone. They wouldn't understand, she said. I didn't answer, because what she really meant was they would see me, and she wasn't ready for that. Telling our daughter was the hardest thing I've ever done. We didn't give details. We didn't assign blame. We just said Mommy and Daddy wouldn't be living together anymore, that we both loved her, that none of this was her fault. She cried. I held her and felt something tear inside me that will probably never fully heal. After that, my focus narrowed. Protect my child. Protect myself, legally and financially. Don't let chaos decide the future. I contacted a lawyer, opened a separate bank account, documented everything calmly, methodically. I didn't threaten, I didn't explode, I didn't try to win. I just refused to lose more than I already had. Elena noticed the shift. "You're acting like I'm a stranger," she said one evening. "You made yourself one," I replied quietly. She didn't answer. That night, I slept on the couch again. The house felt unfamiliar now, like a place I was passing through instead of living in. Every room held memories that didn't match reality anymore. I kept thinking about all the times she'd told me I was the problem, that I wasn't enough, that I needed to change. Now I understood. Those words weren't reflections of me. They were shields. And once they broke, there was nothing left to hide behind. I didn't expose her. I didn't have to. Lies fall apart on their own when the truth stops protecting them. Once I stopped covering for her, emotionally, socially, financially, things unraveled faster than I expected. Elena assumed that even if our marriage was over, the rest of her life would stay intact. Friends, family, her routines, the version of herself she'd carefully curated for everyone else. That illusion didn't last. It started with small cracks. She had to explain why we were suddenly separating after buying a house, why I'd moved my things into a different room, why I wasn't attending events with her anymore. She tried vague explanations at first, communication issues, we grew apart, stress. People listened. Then they asked questions, and the stories didn't line up. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't volunteer details. I simply stopped lying on her behalf. When asked directly, I said one sentence and nothing more. She was unfaithful. That was it. No dramatics, no elaboration. That sentence did more damage than any rant ever could. Her parents came to talk to her. Long, serious conversations behind closed doors. I could hear the tension in their voices through the walls. the people use when disappointment replaces denial. Friends stopped reaching out to her the way they used to. Invitations slowed. Messages became shorter. Some people disappeared entirely. She noticed. She grew bitter. "You turned everyone against me," she accused one night. I told the truth. What people do with it isn't in my control. That made her angrier than if I'd screamed at her. Because screaming would have given her something to point at. Calm left her with nothing. Meanwhile, the men she'd been talking to vanished, one by one. No messages, no check-ins, no concern for her emotional collapse. She'd built an entire second life around validation, and when it stopped being easy, it evaporated. I watched her struggle with that realization, not with satisfaction, with clarity. Those men weren't connections, they were distractions, and once consequences appeared, distractions lost their appeal. Our house became unbearable to live in together. The tension was constant. She alternated between anger, self-pity, and attempts at friendliness that felt hollow. One night, she said quietly, "I didn't think this would destroy everything." I looked at her and answered honestly, "I think you did. You just didn't think it would destroy your version of everything." She didn't respond. I began planning for separation in real terms. Housing options, custody schedules, a future that didn't include constant anxiety or suspicion. Every step forward felt heavy, but also steady. For the first time in months, I wasn't confused. I was grieving, but I wasn't doubting myself anymore. And that made all the difference.
The affair ended, but the damage didn't. What followed was the longest, quietest, and most brutal part of the story, living beside someone who had already destroyed everything. Those weeks under the same roof felt endless. We weren't fighting anymore. Fighting requires energy, and whatever fuel existed between us had burned out. What remained was something colder. Two people sharing space, history, and a child, while pretending not to suffocate. Elena avoided me when she could. When she couldn't, she spoke carefully, like every word was being measured for damage. Sometimes she tried to be normal, asked about dinner, mentioned errands, talked about our daughter's school. Other times she snapped over nothing, anger flaring when guilt crept too close. I stayed calm. Not because it was easy, but because calm was the only thing keeping me functional. The hardest moments were with our daughter. She sensed the shift immediately. Kids always do. She asked why Mommy was sad, why Daddy slept on the couch, why the house felt different. I told her we were going through a change, that both of us loved her, that none of this was her fault. Every time she cried, I felt it in my chest like a physical wound. Elena struggled with that part too, but in a different way. I could see the shame on her face when our daughter clung to me, when she asked questions Elena couldn't answer without lying. That shame often turned into irritation. "She's acting like I don't exist," Elena muttered once. "She's confused," I replied, just like I was. That ended the conversation. Money became another pressure point. The house we'd poured everything into now felt like a trap. Bills, mortgage payments, renovations, all of it hung over us like unfinished business from a life that no longer existed. Elena started stressing openly about finances, about how hard things would be alone, about how unfair it all felt. I listened without reacting. Support ends when trust does. Some nights, I lay awake thinking about how close I'd come to blaming myself for all of this. All the times she'd told me I wasn't enough, that I was distant, that I needed to change. Now I saw it clearly. Those weren't reflections of my failures. They were distractions from hers. She tried once more to talk about reconciliation, not dramatically, softly, carefully. "We could still fix this," she said. "People make mistakes." I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "This wasn't a mistake," I said quietly. "It was a pattern." She didn't argue, because she knew I was right. As the move-out plans solidified, the house began to feel lighter in strange ways. Not happy, but breathable, like the walls themselves were relieved that the pretending was ending. I started imagining life on the other side of this. Not dating, not replacing her, just peace. And that thought, quiet, steady, unremarkable peace, felt like hope. The betrayal didn't end my marriage. Accepting the truth did. The day Elena moved out wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no last-minute confessions, no grand apologies. Just boxes, quiet instructions. Our daughter watching carefully, trying to understand why her world was changing. I helped her load the car, not because I owed her anything, but because kindness doesn't disappear just because trust does. I hugged my daughter longer than usual, promised her routine, promised her safety, promised her that love doesn't vanish just because adults make terrible choices. Elena stood at the door for a moment before leaving. "I never meant for this to happen," she said softly. I believed her, but belief didn't change the outcome. "I know, but meaning isn't the same as responsibility." She nodded, eyes wet, and left. When the door closed, the house felt empty but honest. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for another lie, another explanation, another shift in behavior. There was no tension humming under the surface, no confusion, no fear of what I might find next, just reality. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Grief comes in waves. Some days I missed the woman I thought she was. Other days I felt relief so deep it scared me. But through all of it, one thing stayed constant: clarity. I stopped questioning myself. I stopped replaying conversations. I stopped wondering what I could have done differently. Because the truth was simple, even if it was painful. I trusted, she deceived. I noticed, she denied. I chose myself and my daughter before bitterness could take root. I didn't win anything, but I didn't lose myself either. Now, my focus is small and steady. Being present, being honest, building a life where my daughter grows up seeing that love doesn't require humiliation, secrecy, or self-erasure. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fixing what's broken. It's walking away calmly once you realize it was never built on truth to begin with.